Okay, so we're back and we're going to start talking about Windows Azure websites. And this is Tyler Dirksen again, coming to you from Winnipeg, Manitoba. And this is just going to be a quick demonstration of what are the capabilities you can do using Windows Azure websites. So Windows Azure websites are kind of one of the new things that was added to the Windows Azure platform services over the summer months. And so it provides you with a really rich interface for just deploying general basic websites in a variety of different languages and platforms onto Windows Azure. So without further ado, let's just go into kind of where this set of services fits into the overall idea of cloud in general. So many of you may have seen this kind of slide before. I'll just kind of outline what it's all about. So an application or even a simple website is actually combined of a number of different things that you have to manage if you host a website in your own data center. So on the left there, so there's basically a stack of responsibilities. So at the bottom of the responsibility stack is the hardware. And then it goes into, if you use virtualization for your hardware or if you don't, you have to have an operating system on top of that hardware and network, firewall, data, and the application itself. So with Windows Azure, you have the capability with virtual machines to say, okay, well, I don't really want to care about, I know where approximately this virtual machine is being hosted, but I don't want to manage the virtualization and the uptime and the backups and all that other fun stuff. So I just want to manage the operating system and above. And with Bruce just previously talked about, with virtual machines, you can manage that component of the stack. Now, when I first did my first talk on cloud services, sometimes the operating system management can be a little bit of a pain, and you don't necessarily care about some of the nuances of the operating system, so you can kind of take that out of the equation. And you can go up to virtual networks and firewall rules and data and applications, so you have more control over your services and how many services you have, all the way up to your actual application. So as you can see, we're steadily decreasing the amount of responsibilities you have, and websites decreases it the most of any of the Windows Azure services. So with websites, you mainly are just dealing with your application and your data, and you don't have very much, if any, constraints over a lot of the other things. You have some capabilities as far as ports and different things like that, but not a lot, and you can do different settings and configurations like I will be talking about later. But the point is to eliminate as much of the actual responsibility for you as possible, and kind of offload that onto a Windows Azure data center. So that pertains to Windows Azure websites. So with this particular screen here, there's a couple of different main feature benefits of going to Windows Azure websites. The first one is that you can get up and running really, really fast, and I'm actually going to go through a demonstration of how to run a Windows Azure website or host a Windows Azure website, and it's really, really quick. And in fact, we're going to see how quick it can be. And you can code smart by using a lot of the tools and web frameworks that you're used to. Not only ASP and ASP.NET, or hopefully you don't do ASP, but ASP.NET mainly. But you can also use PHP, Node.js, and some others coming soon to the Windows Azure websites platform to do your development and to write your application. And you can manage in Windows or just online using the websites. And there's also a set of command line tools you can install on OS X or Linux that are provided via the Node libraries. And you can actually do some management on your own machines if you run OS X and you don't need Windows, or you don't want to do a management over a website. And you can very easily go live, and the main issue with that in the past has been doing a lot of mapping and setup for DNS entries and stuff like that. Windows Azure websites makes it very easy to specify domain names, or even domain names without any subdomains, on Windows Azure, and you can get your site up and running as fast as possible. So with that, let's actually switch over and start a demo, and we'll see how fast it actually is to create a Windows Azure website. So this is my Windows Azure portal, as you've seen before, and with a variety of these different talks, this is kind of the hub of everything that you want to do in Windows Azure. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the new on the bottom and say under the compute, I'm going to say website, and I'm just going to click create. So I'm going to create a website, and I'm going to call it Workshop 2. And it's going to be in East US. Right now, East US is the only data center that supports website hosting at this point. And so I'm going to create that website, and we'll see how quick it is. So it's creating the site, and it's done. So I have my Workshop 2 site, and that actually shows up in my public URL at workshop2.azurewebsites.net. And you can see that there's this very basic page that comes up that's deployed with your website. And so, like, how long was that? Not even a minute. And I have a public website at my disposal. So what happens if I want to actually edit this website? There's a couple of different options for you, so I can probably go to here. Probably outlines it a little bit better. So you can publish your app using a publish profile with Web Matrix and stuff like that. You can also integrate your website into source control using TFS or Git. You can even have the website monitor the GitHub repository, so any push made to a GitHub repository will actually be up and uploaded into your Windows Azure website. But one of the really easy ways to get into your website and do some changes is at the very bottom here. There's a couple of different things. Oh, sorry, my Zoom It is not running. At the very bottom here, there's a couple of different options, and one of them is just a Web Matrix button. So let's see what happens if I press that Web Matrix button. So I already have Web Matrix 2 installed on my machine, and it's launching that application right now. And if not, it would actually go through the Web Platform Installer and install it for you. It's actually a very easy process. And Web Matrix is kind of the web-friendly Visual Studio in that it provides you with a lot of basic functionality to edit web pages on the fly, and it's very easy to use. It's not as crazy and complex and maybe not as feature-rich as Visual Studio, but it's very good for people who are just running websites. So right now it's just copying my remote site, which is basically just a couple of files, and it's configuring my site on my local machine so I can run and test things properly. So once I have that done, I can go to Files and see there's this hosting start.html site that actually is what shows up when I hit the website. So the Windows Azure website welcome. But I don't want to do that. I want to actually add an HTML page for index.html. And here I'm actually going to do an H1 header that says hello cloud. I can save that, and right at the top corner here I can just hit publish here, and it publishes my application. So using the publish file and it's kind of looking through the delta of what's happening here. I'm adding a file. I can hit continue, and it's publishing my application. It says publishing complete. And what happens if I refresh this page now? What happens if I refresh this page? It says hello cloud. And you see how easy that was, right? With publish profiles and Web Matrix, it makes it very, very easy to do this kind of thing. So one thing that I want to kind of go through, though, is along with that demo, we're just going to talk about how to deploy kind of pre-built gallery websites to your application, because you may not want to build a website from scratch. There's a lot of very rich full-featured websites out there that you want to maybe create. So I'm just going to hit new, and I want to build a new website, except for this time I'm going to choose the third option, which is from gallery. And I'll switch the screen so you can see this straight up here. And there's a variety of different things you can actually choose from the gallery. Some of the new ones that if you haven't looked in a little while you might see that are new are you can choose a MediaWiki site or a PHP-BB site. I think there's a couple of other brand new ones as well, but I don't know them off hand. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to create a WordPress site. So for those that may not know about WordPress, one of the main kind of special things about creating a WordPress site on Windows Azure is that WordPress itself is written in PHP, and it's not written in .NET. So I'm going to call this Workshop WordPress, or WP. and I'm going to create a new MySQL database for this in East US. And yes, I did say MySQL. So there's actually a partner called ClearDB that has partnered with. Oh, my quota is reached. So let's see if I can reuse my current MySQL database for this. And so that's my database that actually hosts my blog. So let's see what happens if I do this. And I can create a WordPress site from that database. So I'm not entirely sure how fast this is going to be going because it's deploying all of WordPress, but we'll see. It should be fairly fast. Even though it's creating a whole site, it should be about the same as any regular site. Let's see. So I'll just show you a little bit of, this is probably going to be running on the same WordPress kind of background database as my blog, which is blog.tylerdixon.com. And I've actually changed that by setting some configuration options in my website. So I can set up and say which PHP version I'm going to be using, and one of the main things I can do is set up domain names. So here I actually have the main tylerd@azurewebsites.net that comes with any website, but I also have set a tylerdixon.com main domain name here, and you can set up a number of settings, connection strings, and whatnot, and MySQL connections and everything there. So let's go back to our websites and see if we actually have something running here. Okay, so I have my WordPress blog up and running, and let's see what happens if I hit this blog. So it actually says Tyler's Azure Developer Blog, but you can see at the very top corner that it's actually workshopwp.azurewebsites.net. And if this was a fresh, MySQL database without all the WordPress stuff in there, you'd be provisioning basically a new WordPress database from here, and basically starting your own blog. And I have seen a number of people that use the Windows Azure or AzureWebsites.net domain name, even though they maybe want their own domain name or whatever. It doesn't necessarily matter. So sorry, I'm kind of babbling a little bit. What I'm actually talking about is the websites that I created for this workshop, like Workshop 1 and Workshop 2. You may notice that they actually say mode free. And so there's a couple of different modes that you can scale up to when you're creating Windows Azure websites. And I have my TylerD website is under a shared mode, which allows me to set up different domain names on that website. But any of these that I created, I'm not paying for these at all because they're just on the AzureWebsites.net domain name. But if I do want to add my own domain name, I need to upgrade to a shared mode. And how do I actually do that? So if I'm going to go to the website that I created, Workshop 2, I can go to Scale. And there's a couple of different options for me. I can hit Free, Shared, or Reserved. By hitting Shared, I can add the capability of setting my domain name. Or Reserved, I can have the capability of actually having my own VM that I'm running on. So I'll actually explain a little bit what that's all about by switching over to the PowerPoint slides here. So after my little demo on WordPress, I kind of did a little bit of a demo on scaling diagnostics. Actually, I didn't quite yet, so let's just switch back and show you a little bit of the monitoring features that happen here. I'll just switch to my website because it has kind of a more rich monitor. So you can see there's been a variety of traffic on my site, and it's basically just running in the background lots of the times because it is just a WordPress site. And I get very rich details over all of the information that I require in order to run my website, as in how much data is coming in, data going out, CPU time in seconds, and different requests and stuff like that, like how many requests my websites are getting here. And it's very, very easy for me to actually see what the health is of my site. And if this is kind of on the top level, I know to scale up my site and kind of balance that load out. So how would I actually scale my site? So this is the thing that I was showing before. So if I actually wanted to say, okay, well my blog is getting a lot of traffic, I'm going to scale that up to 2 instances, or even 3 instances. You have a minimum amount of instances that you can kind of scale up to using a shared resource. But if you switch to reserve, then you can scale up to any number of or you could possibly scale up to higher instance size or more instances from there. Yeah, so there's the possibility of kind of looking at what your website is doing, what kind of load your website is having there with Monitor, and then scaling up accordingly right away. So what if all these shared and everything mean? Now, there's the free option is actually just the same as the shared option, but the shared option has the domain name capabilities. So whenever I talk about shared, you can basically just say, okay, well, that just means free as well. So with a shared instance, your VM is actually sitting on basically a farm of shared instances, and it could actually be sitting beside possibly another Azure account's website. Right, you don't own any sort of instance at that point, and you can't guarantee that your website is going to be the only one running on that shared instance. The shared instances are scaled accordingly, but it's still kind of up to the Azure team in order to do that, and you don't really have very much, if any, control. When you set 2 instances, you will have the shared instances that may or may not exist on separate machines, but it does affect the actual load capabilities of your website. It's not like you're not getting any more power by saying I have 2 shared instances rather than 1. You do have the ability to say, okay, well, I'm experiencing a lot of load here. I'm going to scale up. And even with shared, you can do the scaling capabilities. But if you want to scale even more, you can actually take your website and put it on a dedicated reserved instance. So with the reserved instance, you actually own, well, not really own, but you deploy to that entire machine. And that entire machine is basically yours, and no other websites no other subscriptions websites will be deployed onto that machine. Now, I was very specific to say no other subscriptions websites. You can scale a reserved instance up to 2 instances, so you'll be paying for 2 small or medium or extra large instances. And you'll be paying the cost of those instances, which is very similar to the virtual machine or cloud service cost for those machines. But this is the little bit of a tricky part here. With this, all of the websites that you have on your reserved scale for a particular data center, in this case it would be East US, now all of your websites are actually going to be deployed onto your reserved instances. So if you have 3 sites, let's say in this example here, and I have a 2 reserved instance scale, all the 3 sites are going to be deployed onto my 2 reserved instances. So even though you may have, so if you say 2 for the larger site, and you say 1 reserve, or I have a reserved instance for the other 2, the other 2 are actually sharing the capabilities of those the main set of reserved instances for that data center. So the main thing is that when you look at your Azure bill, let's say, what you will see in a shared instance space is that you're using shared time, and it'll have a fairly small number, and it'll be specific to a website, right? This is website A's shared time. This is website B's shared time. This is website C's shared time. And when you switch to reserved instances, you will still have this the individual cost of each website as far as data in, data out, and bandwidth usage, but you will have this one lump kind of usage that will say Azure websites East US, let's say. And that means these are the reserved instances that you consume for all the East US data centers, and or in the East US data center. So you kind of lump together all of your hosting kind of for the reserved instances. Even if you have 3 websites on them, they're all kind of in one. Let's see. Now, even though I'm kind of talking about just regular websites and WordPress sites and sites that you can get from the gallery, a lot of the stuff is very, very helpful when you're creating what are called, they're referred to as modern applications. So applications that may have web APIs and mobile kind of variations and different things like that, they are you know, this service is very capable for those applications as well. It's not just kind of like a mom and pop, you know, basic website, flat content kind of thing, right? If it can host something that can be as complex as WordPress, you can definitely build a very complex MVC application. So I'm just going to switch over to Visual Studio and show you what this actually looks like, not with Web Matrix, but with Visual Studio. So what I can do is I'm going to go back to my websites here, and I've got this modern apps site running, and I created this website just like any other. Now, rather than clicking on the Web Matrix button in the bottom, I'm actually going to click on the Download Publish Profile. So I'm going to download the Publish Profile for this application, and it's going to be a .publish settings file, and I can save that there, but I already have actually one saved to my local desktop. So this is in my MVC application. I just right-click on the application here. I'll kind of zoom in so you can hopefully see this. I right-click on the application, and then I click Publish. Very similar to what we were doing in Cloud Services, but this is actually a standard web publishing. You can actually find a few other providers, web providers that support web deployments. So I have my Modern Apps Web Deployment, Web Deploy, that I've actually that I've received from importing my Publish Profile. So if I hit Import Publish Profile here, I can actually see that this is my Publish Settings file that I've downloaded previously, and I've imported into here. And then I can change some of the things that are going on here. So it's actually pointing at a very obscure endpoint that actually hosts basically web deploy as a service, right, on publish.azurewebsites.windows.net. And it has my password already built into the Publish profile. So this isn't something that you want to be distributing around, because it actually has kind of a salted password in there. It is an encrypted one, but it's still there, and you can still do that. So, and you can also set up what the destination URL of this will be. And if I go to Next, Web Deploy is not necessarily for just your website data or your main content that you can create just with any sort of HTML file or ASPX file. You can get this web deployment process to actually do database updates as well. I don't have any databases in this particular application, but you can see how you can configure up database updates with this web deployment structure as well. And if let's see, I'm just going to, I'm going to zoom out here, and I'm going to change this so that I return another value, 3, with this here. So I'm saving and building my project, and that it's succeeded. So I'm actually going to say publish and kind of go through this thing over here as well. And this is very similar to the Web Matrix piece. So it can see that, okay, well, I've actually changed a .cs file inside my application. So that actually changed to DLL, which was updated, and then possibly some other web config files that were updated as well. So I'm just going to hit publish. And you may not be able to see in the corner, but this is publishing my web application. And just that fast, it will actually deploy my application. And unfortunately, with the change that I made, you can't really see in this main piece here. But in the background, there were some changes to the underlying REST API there. But it's just very, very easy to be able to deploy your new website to a web service and be able to deploy and look at it and see if it's working properly and change it, right? It's very, very you can do a lot of really great back and forth with Visual Studio. You can integrate that process into a continuous integration build or something to say whenever you check into source control, it actually does that update. I could take this code that I have in Visual Studio and start adding it to a Git repository and have the Git repository actually do deployments for me. And actually, just because that is kind of part of what are modern apps these days, I actually have a blog post on how Git deployments happen in on Windows Azure. So when you set up your website for deployments, here I'll switch to the screen. When you set up your website for deployments, you can see that it starts to track, what actually gets deployed via Git, and it actually basically gets informed by GitHub that a particular repository has been changed, and then it will update this website automatically from that repository. And you don't necessarily have to have a GitHub repository. You can create your own repository based off of this here, and just connect to the Windows Azure website. And but the main thing is that you can kind of see and manage what changes occurred to the website, and see that, right, and which one is the active deployment. And you can even say, I want to redeploy this particular version, so you can kind of roll back the changes if you're using GitHub-based deployments. And that kind of functionality is also there when you want to use TFS online, or like I said, if you don't actually have a GitHub or Codeplex Git repository, you can use this as its own repository. So that's just a little bit of that particular demonstration. Well, I only showcased a couple of different frameworks as far as my monitoring, but you can deploy really basic ASP pages, right, and before.NET. You can also deploy Microsoft.NET, ASP.NET, or MVC pages. And with my WordPress update, you can see that it hosts PHP, and it also gives you the ability to run Node.js-based applications right out of the box if you are kind of new and running on the new frameworks like Node.js. And like it says at the bottom there are more frameworks coming soon. So some of the ones that are kind of missing from this list that you can do on cloud services are Ruby and Python and different things like that. And I'm sure that those frameworks are coming soon, as well as .NET 4.5. So I kind of went through a couple of these publishing methods. So the main one that I was using the whole time was the web deployment publishing method, which is just a little bit of, it's kind of like FTP where you're uploading files, but it's a little bit of control on top of those file uploads, where you can add, you know, in other cases you can add different authentication, authorization parameters around that, and you know, where those files go, and different capabilities, as well as uploading databases and stuff like that. So FTP is the, you know, easiest for, you know, basic website designers and stuff like that, because maybe their applications already have FTP capabilities like Dreamweaver and whatnot. But you can get up to very advanced workflows when you're using Git or TFS, when you're doing continuous integration or continuous deployment to these sites, that and continuously deploying certain branches to certain sites, so you can actually have like kind of a beta site going on there. That kind of capability is also there for doing this kind of thing. So this capability is actually provided by, you know, in conjunction with a number of partners. The ones that I did mention are, you know, the ClearDB, which actually provides the MySQL capabilities in Windows Azure. There's a variety of these that provide different gallery websites and everything like that to the kind of Windows Azure gallery, like Drupal and Joomla and different things like that. And they're constantly updating their gallery images and constantly giving support to Microsoft and Windows Azure as far as hosting their images on Windows Azure websites. So just to kind of recap what you can do to get started with Windows Azure websites, the free websites that I was starting to create there, you can have up to 10 free sites on your account. So if you want to try out Windows Azure connected to your GitHub repository, different things like that, you can do that very, very easily with free sites. You won't be able to you know, change the domain names and stuff like that, so you would have to upgrade to shared or reserved if you want to start to doing those kind of things. But you can get started and try out your websites in Windows Azure with just free sites. There's a lot of capabilities that come with Windows Azure websites, in the same way that these capabilities come with the other Windows Azure mechanisms like cloud services and virtual machines, right? You have load balancing, you have storage across instances and stuff like that. And that kind of capability is really, really rich in Windows Azure sites as well. Because you're not constrained by with using a specific type of framework or language, you can basically code smart and deploy and use other different type of data storage mechanisms that are possibly outside of the Microsoft stack, and use a variety of different tools to upload to Windows Azure and integrate with other things like Git or TFS, and use things that just basically either upload web deployments, because there's a variety of products that actually use web deployments as well. So you can use the publish profiles in not only Visual Studio and Web Matrix, in other things as well. And if you can't even do that, you can use just straight FTP, right? Like you can expose an FTP endpoint or use the FTP endpoint to upgrade your sites, right? It's very, very capable. And with those wide variety of capabilities, you can use this on Windows, OS X, or Linux as well. And then once you're ready to go, you kind of have the ability to take your site live by changing it to a shared site or a reserved site and setting up your domain name. And you have a lot of rich capabilities as far as monitoring and scale. So if your site starts receiving a ton of requests, then you can kind of handle that with very relative ease. Instead of having to provision new VMs and start up and different things like that, you can just get a little slider and start sliding it up and have more capabilities for your websites. So that's pretty much all that I have for websites. And if you have any other questions, we're just actually going to go to a break at this point. I'm going to be online for the rest of the day. If you have any questions about cloud services or websites, just post them in the chat window there. Or you can contact me at tylergd@outlook.com. Sorry, I don't have my information on here. Maybe we'll get it up a little bit later. And or just contact John, and he will get a hold of me. And yeah, but thanks very much, everyone, for being online and listening to the Cloud Services Websites talk. And right now, we're just going to transition into a break, and we'll get started with some more sessions after the break.